Joining us today, a Victory News contributor from millionvoices.org, John Graves, is back with us. That's wonderful. Honorable Jason Isaac of the Texas Public Policy Foundation will be with us in a moment as well. To get things started, let's go to Mike Garofalo.
Greg, target Syria. On Thursday night, the U.S. military used airstrikes to target Iranian-backed militia groups in Syria. According to UPI, the attack was in response to a deadly rocket attack against U.S. forces last week in Iraq. According to the Defense Department, Joe Biden directed the attack in what is being described as the first public military operation conducted by the Biden administration since the president's inauguration. And while Republicans still have some control over what happens in the upper chamber, the Democrat-controlled House is quickly steamrolling things like religious liberty. House Democrats, along with 3 Republicans, passed the Equality Act on Thursday by a vote of 224 to 206. The legislation expands the 1964 Civil Rights Act by expanding the definition of a protected class to include sex, gender identity, and sexual orientation. The legislation offers little in protection for religious exemptions, and if passed by the Senate, could result in a situation where organizations are forced to choose between their religious beliefs and following the law. The bill redefines public accommodation to include any establishment that provides a service, including churches, shelters operated by religious groups, faith-based adoption agencies, and educational institutions associated with religious denominations and associations. All eyes now turn to the Senate to see if they will debate the bill. Greg, Senator Rand Paul took a stand for parental rights and America's children yesterday during the confirmation hearing of HHS nominee Rachel Levine.
I'm alarmed that you won't say with certainty that minors should not have the ability to make the decision to take hormones that will affect them for the rest of their life. Will you make a more firm decision on whether or not minors should be involved in these decisions?
Senator, transgender medicine is a very complex and nuanced field, and if confirmed to the position of Assistant Secretary of Health, I would certainly be pleased to come to your office and talk with you and your staff about the standards of care and the complexity of this field.
Let it go into the record that the witness refused to answer the question. The question is a very specific one. Should minors be making these momentous decisions? For most of the history of medicine, we wouldn't let you have a cut sewn up in the ER, but you're willing to let a minor take things that prevent their puberty, and you think they get that back? You give a woman testosterone enough that she grows a beard, you think she's going to go back looking like a woman when you stop the testosterone? You have permanently changed them.
President Joe Biden's pick for Assistant Secretary of Health is facing an uphill battle for confirmation after the Republican senators slammed their belief that the government should be able to override the wishes of parents of children who are suffering from gender dysphoria. Now, during the hearing, Paul pushed Levine on her previous statements where she defended the use of hormone therapy and gender reassignment surgery on minors without the consent of their parents, comparing the practice to that of genital mutilation, something that is considered egregious in Western culture. Levine is the first openly transgender person nominated for a federal office. And Rand Paul wasn't the only senator standing up for the rights of Americans on Thursday. Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell also stepped up to the metaphorical plate, if you will. McConnell accused House Democrats of plotting to nationalize the election process by implementing a host of federal regulations that would strip states of their power to hold a free and fair election.
This week, House Democrats say they'll try to recycle failed legislation that would have Washington Democrats grab unprecedented power over how America conducts its elections and how American citizens can engage in political speech.
The Kentucky Republican said the For the People Act would result in a national policy on election issues such as early voting, registration, and no excuse absentee balloting. He called the bill a sweeping federal takeover of state and local election procedures. Meanwhile, Joe Biden is attempting to reshape America's relationship with Saudi Arabia. The president spoke with King Salman on Thursday. Now, the White House said during the call, he highlighted the importance of human rights and vowed to make the relationship between Saudi Arabia and the United States strong and more resilient. While the call focused on the relationship between the two countries, the pretense for the call was a report set to be released that details the 2018 murder of Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi. The report is a declassified version of a top secret assessment that sources say singled out the king's son, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, for approving the murder of Khashoggi in the kingdom's consulate in Istanbul. Despite the imminent release of the report, the Biden administration insists that it wants to maintain a strong relationship with the Arab nation. And a former U.S. Olympics gymnastic coach with ties to disgraced sports doctor Larry Nassar was charged Thursday afternoon in Michigan with 24 crimes. A short time after that, officials announced that Gettert had died by suicide after being charged. John Gettert was the head coach of the 2012 U.S. Women's Olympic Gymnastics team, which won a gold medal. The charges on Thursday included sexual assault, human trafficking, and running a criminal enterprise. Greg, back to you.
Thanks, Mike. Troubling things. John Graves, I want to bring you in, millionvoices.org and a Victory News contributor. So many of these things that we're hearing from the Democrats and all seem like social issues is the forefront of what they're trying to push through with their nominees, even with the Equality Act passing the House yesterday. Your thoughts?
It's really, really troubling. You go from the Equality Act, which basically defines whatever you want your gender to be, which is an insult to anybody who's a black American who's born with black skin. You're now treated by somebody who just chooses to be a different sexual preference or even orientation. And it's not a coincidence that you see what then happens. Look at those last two stories. You've got a man named Roger who changes his name to Rachel, who's now going to be the second most powerful person in the Biden administration for our health of our nation, refusing to say that a child who can't get a Band-Aid without calling their parents can change their gender by the agenda of the education system. And then little girls on the U.S. gymnastics team that were molested, that were sex trafficked. That is a sexual preference of a lot of people who can just decide to do that. And people need to wake up to the reality of what's happening. There's a political correct spirit that's out there, but it's hurting people. It's damaging people, and especially children. The church has got to wake up in this hour.
John, I was a little concerned. I was looking at what the Republican committee's doing, and they're trying to reach out to black voters. President Trump did a very good job of that. Why does it seem to me that they're playing that same game?
Sometimes on the Republican side of it, unfortunately, it's lip service. President Trump did something that Obama, when he had a supermajority in the Senate, supermajority in the House, never did, which was pass prison reform. 95% of African Americans benefit from that particular reform in the prison system. And yet, they're spending $2 million, the RNC says, to try to reach out to them in these states. One person, the founder, Mark Zuckerberg of Facebook, spent $400 to $500 million just in swing states, completely outside the scope of the political party and the political process. And those are the swing states that made the difference in the president. So it's like putting lipstick on a pig or a Band-Aid on a bullet wound. They're just nipping at it. What President Trump did was treated all Americans the same, and he increased his African American support by 150% and his Hispanic support more than that, while being called a racist non-stop for 3 to 4 years by the Democrat Party and their allies in the social media and legacy media mainstream news. It's, people are going to wake up, I believe, but sometimes it has to get really bad for them to kind of go, wait a minute, where are we going here? And I think you're going to see that more and more, Greg.
Thank you so much for that insight. Previous COVID-19 relief bills have done what their name indicates, provided targeted relief for those impacted by the pandemic. Well, this one, the next one, is expected to be voted on in the House today, comes with a very hefty price tag of $1.9 trillion. So where's all of your money going? Well, hang on to your hat. According to the New York Post, Section 105 of the bill offers socially disadvantaged farm owners a total debt forgiveness of up to $100,000 per farmer with no strings attached. Now, the word socially disadvantaged reportedly means whoever faced historic discrimination. So here's the thing. White farmers need not to apply. Mike, I'm going to pitch it to you. Mike Garofalo.
Greg, Joe Biden's pick for Health and Human Services Secretary continues to find himself in the hot seat. Listen to this exchange this week between Montana Senator Steve Daines and nominee Xavier Becerra.
Name one abortion restriction that you might support.
Senator, let me try to respond this way. I have tried to make sure on this important issue for so many people, where oftentimes, again, we have different views, but deeply held views, that I have tried to make sure that I am abiding by the law. Because whether it's a particular restriction or whether it's the whole idea of abortion, whether we agree or not, we have to come to some conclusion, and that's where the law gives us.
But is there, just to be clear, is there any line you would draw? Is there just one restriction as it relates to abortion
So
that you might support?
Senator, you're talking to the spouse of a OBGYN who for decades has practiced saving lives of women and babies. And I can tell you that from the stories I've heard from Carolina, my wife, I know how hard many women struggle just to save the life of their baby.
Becerra, the Attorney General of California, for the most part, dodged all policy questions. He did say, my job will be to make sure that I am following the law.
John Graves, wrap a bow on this, around this for us spiritually today. 10 seconds.
Don't give up hope. Don't be deceived. Spiritually discern things and make the right decision in prayer and in your actions.
Thank you so much for all of you being with us today.